Let's talk Reylo fanfiction. Hi, welcome to my channel. If you know me, hi. If you are new here, my name is Teresa. This should be the third part of a series where I am going over what I call the Reylo effect, how that couple from the Star Wars sequels has infiltrated the publishing world. And there's just countless of Reylo fanfiction that has been turned into published work. And in this video, this is going to be the first of where I am comparing the fanfiction to the actual published work. I am starting with this one because I read the published work not knowing it was Reylo. I just thought the premise sounded interesting. That was 2 months ago. I borrowed it from Libby, so I do not have the actual published book with me, but I remember quite a few things from that book, and I finished reading the fan fiction late last night. So let us just dive into the comparison of My Roommate is a Vampire, the published work, and My Roommate is a Virgin Vampire, the fan fiction. So the premise for both of them are kind of the same. The fan fiction is much more simplified, but it is a vampire puts out a Craigslist listing asking for a roommate, and he lives in an apartment that is luxurious, and this girl kind of can't believe it and applies anyways. And yeah, let's start with the fan fiction as that came first. So My Roommate is a Virgin Vampire started as a Twitter fic, which I am completely unfamiliar with. I started my fan fiction journey. Hi, Shu. We're gonna wait for Shu to do her thing. She might make an appearance on screen, her face at least. Nope. Okay. To give a little background, my experience with fan fiction goes back 20 years. I started reading fan fiction on a little site called Quizilla. It was mostly anime that I read, and also some works inspired by a book series where a kid goes to a magical school. The fan fictions were better than the published work. I also have dabbled in writing fan fiction for various animes, never such long works where it would be considered a book length of fan fiction, but I dabbled in what was then called dribbles. There was no lemon or lime terms that do not exist anymore, but were used to denotate whether or not a fiction had what is now called smut or spice in it. So, going back, My Roommate is a Virgin Vampire started as a Twitter fic with multimedia elements, and then about halfway through, the author switched to Archive of Our Own, where most of the smut scenes happen. And then she concluded the work with an author's note, which I will talk about after going over some of the points of this fan fiction, but I thought the author's note was very interesting. So let's just get into it, right? So there's not much to say about the fan fiction itself. There is honestly not much going on with it. The premise, at least, the multimedia elements were okay. My big problem with it is the voice of both of the characters. We have Benjamin C. Solo and Ray Nima. They're nothing like their characters in the sequels. The voice for both of them is just
It's a no for me.
definitely like out of character, one would say. Ray is a generic girl, and Benjamin Solo is just in some points a naive, out of date vampire. At other points seems to have an incredible grasp on the world. He's naive when in all matters of sex, which, you know, being a virgin doesn't automatically mean that you are naive, even if you come from a different time. He's supposed to be like 332, which I don't want to do the math right now. That's like he's from the 17 or 1800s. He constantly refers to Ray by her first and last name, and I really did not like that. There's a lot to be said about voice, and he writes in a diary, and it sounds like a teenage girl who is way into Taylor Swift. And as a woman who is very into Taylor Swift, just it's not meant to be a dig. It's just not what I would expect from Kylo Ren, who is very closed off in his emotions and cannot express them in any way that will save his life. He is just very odd in the fan fiction, and it was very not great to read. Ray, on the other hand, like I said, she's very generic.
Where's the flavor in this?
Text between her and Finn are super generic. There's no voice within the multimedia whatsoever, and it's such a shame because I feel like those are elements that can really, really capture voice. There are plenty of epistolary works that work well, and there are also plenty of works that utilize text format that work well and can capture voice. This is not one of them, unfortunately. Every single time that Ray notices Benjamin's hands, she describes how big they are.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Now, in this 120 something page fan fiction, his hands are mentioned 8 times. First, while typing up her questions for Benjamin, there should be a comma there. Ray does not imagine what he must have looked like, hunched over his tiny phone, painstakingly texting her with those massive hands. And she absolutely does not keep thinking of that image long after she sends the email either. Ray is immediately horny for this man. From the first instant she meets him, it's very much insta love. He is just like, she is the most beautiful human, and she is like, I want those massive hands to strangle me. The second instance with hands is an author's note. Somebody drew amazing art of him trying and failing to text her, which when I see large hands, when I read of large hands, I'm not thinking, oh, that's sexy. I'm thinking, does he have a medical condition? Why is that something you notice every time? Second instance, well, third instance technically. Benjamin nods, his large hands stuffed deep inside the pockets of his trench coat. He's still standing in front of the open door, making no move to either close it or enter the room. His eyes are trained so intensely on her, needs another comma. Ray can feel the heat of his gaze from all the way across the room. Fourth instance, do you like nature documentaries, Ray Nima? Yeah, he asks abruptly, grabbing the remote, his hands shaking so subtly, Ray nearly misses it. So, no mention of giant hands there. So that's one instance where his massive hands aren't mentioned. He opens the door and enters noiselessly, carrying a tray of something that looks and smells suspiciously like some kind of rich breakfast food in his large hands. Next to the food is a glass of water, two little round orange red pills, and several sheets of paper folded neatly in half. Large hands. The next instance is of her waiting hands, quickly followed by, it's surprisingly heavy, and he hefted it in his large hands as if it weighed nothing at all. Eighth. Ray blinks at him, her eyes falling to his hands. For the first time, she realizes there are ink stains on his fingertips. I swear there's more mention of hands, but I don't know how much I can deal with the comparison of just how big he is. I don't get it, but there are other ways to show attraction to hands, which is valid, without just describing how large they are. Literally, just that descriptor just makes it seem like it's something wrong with him. So the author uses the repetition of her full name in Benjamin's point of view and the repetition of her noticing his hands. And I realized the value of repetition in literature. It can add something to the story. It did not add anything to this story. It was a simple story, but still. This was also very insta love. The entirety of the story takes place in maybe a week. We don't really get a nailed down timeline of the events, but they meet, they're instantly attracted to each other. He instantly tells her he is a vampire. She gets over it within a night and agrees to live with him. They have a moment on the couch where she invites him to watch TV with her, and she falls asleep and somehow ends up with her head in his lap, and that gives him a boner.
Oh my God, what is that?
And she's asleep when this happens, and it's just so cringy. I cannot. But we actually aren't in the moment of when that happens. He's writing about it in his diary, and then we see the after effects of it. So he is then mortified that he got a boner, which apparently he hasn't had in a while. She is just like, oh my gosh, he's so hot, but he doesn't want me. And then her friend Rose invites her out for drinks, and she gets so drunk. She first orders a toy from Bad Dragon, and we have this fun little insertion of multimedia of where you just see the front page of the website. Then she texts him and is like, oh my god, you are so hot. Please come out with us. I know you hate me and you don't want to see me, but please, please come. And he apparently, and we find this out when we're in his point of view afterwards, got so out of sorts with that he fucking smashes his phone with his large fucking hands. Okay. And then he's just like, oh no, she can't be attracted to me because I got a boner and she was asleep. I have insulted her greatly. I have to talk to her, but I'm not good with words. So let me write her a letter. And he delivers this letter of his feelings after her night out, and then immediately leaves the room for her to read the letters. And he writes, Dear Ray, I have spent much time trying to make sense of the text you sent last night, and even more time trying to think of what to tell you this morning. While I know this letter is a poor substitute for a face to face communication, it will have to do. I am too cowardly to tell you any of what I am about to tell you in person. First things first, Ray Nima, please know you were dead wrong when you said I don't enjoy being around you. The truth is just opposite. In fact, I do enjoy being around you. Very, very much. Too much. You will likely want to move out after I tell you this, but you deserve the truth, which is as follows. When you fell asleep with your head on my lap the other night, my normally docile and dependable manhood became swollen, rigid, and very significantly erect.
Judith! What's another word for engorged?
I'll look it up.
Okay.
The things I imagined when your lips parted a little in sleep and I felt your breath on my clothed thigh, which you wouldn't have, would have sent me to jail in a different era. You said in your text to me that you find me hot and cute. I have a vague understanding of how those words are used in early 21st century slang, and I cannot tell you how my heart soared when I read them. But you are kind, Rainima, and pure of heart. I will not sully your virtue any more than I already have by requiring you to interact with me, the person who let you sleep with your face pressed right up against his erect manhood for nearly an hour. God, my man, wake her up and leave. What if your lips had parted further as you slept, and the tip of my turgid rod had slipped inside your sweet, sweet mouth? The horror. How does that happen? You are clothed, my man. Unless you are literally assaulting her, that's not even in the realm of possibility. Rainima, You're the most beautiful creature I have ever laid eyes upon. I, in contrast, am depraved. I also drink human blood. For your sake, I think it is best kept our interactions to a minimum going forward. Very truly yours, Benjamin. She already knows you drink human blood, my dude. Like, he doesn't kill people. That's very clearly set out. He just steals from blood banks, from people who need it. So good for him, I guess. Second, he started the letter with Reylo. He does not have to say her name multiple times throughout that letter. She knows who you're talking about. We know who you're talking about. It's not necessary. I will say this author did tag this as comedy. I just don't think that the humor is very funny because there's not really any setup for it to be funny. It's just very cheap jokes like, look at this man who is very old, who doesn't understand basic concepts, even though I'm pretty sure that these words were used throughout. And there's no reason, like, I will get into it when I'm talking about the published version, where she actually does give a reason for why he is so fucking uninformed about what goes on in the world. But in this, there's no reason. He has been alive, he has been present for his 332 years on Earth, and for some reason, he just doesn't know what's going on now, even though he goes out at night and I'm assuming has other human interactions, but I don't know. Apparently not. Next thing I want to talk about, when he signs off on a letter or something, he uses BCE. His full name is Benjamin C. Solo. And when we figure out what the C means, it's really quite something. I will give you a second to guess. What could the C for Benjamin C. Solo stand for? Did you guess Chewbacca? Because I didn't, and when I found that out, I was just like, this is so dumb. Maybe it's because I'm not in the fandom that I just don't see the charm of this, but it was so much. Back to the letter writing though. Rey understands that he doesn't want to have a face to face interaction, so she writes him a letter. And it's as follows: Benjamin, I'm writing you a letter back instead of talking to you face to face because I get that you'd rather talk things out this way. I'll admit I'm a little confused. You've been staying away from me because you got a boner. Is that it? I mean, honestly, if a man was thinking inappropriate thoughts about me and was just like, I'm gonna give her some space until I let her know, honestly, gotta respect it. What do you mean? I don't understand why that would upset you so much. It's just a boner. Why would you think that was a bad thing? I'm flattered, honestly, because I meant it when I said, I think you're cute and hot. I wish you'd said something earlier. Ray. Benjamin reads Ray's note all the way through 3 different times and consults Urban Dictionary twice to make sense of what she's written him. Even still, he can't quite believe it. He must have it all wrong, right? And then we get a insert of the Urban Dictionary for the word boner. I feel like maybe just consult Merriam-Webster because it also gives you the colloquial word and you could tell the origins of it, which date back to a time when you were still alive. I was gonna look it up, but you were alive then. He writes her back, Dear Ray, as delighted as I am to know you find me attractive, what do you mean by it's just a boner? It's not how you would use it, the quotations in that. Whatever. How can you be flattered by what happened the other night? Your purity, your virtue. Surely this is the most depraved thing that has ever happened to you, isn't it? And it's all my fault. I admit I am very confused right now, too. Among other things. Very truly yours, Benjamin. Apparently, it takes a while for the puzzle pieces to fall into place for Ray. Apparently, she can't think of the reason why he's so naive, which, I mean, fucking same, girl. I'm not gonna keep going over the letters. Basically, they have an exchange. They continue to have this exchange until he admits that he is a virgin.
You're a virgin who can't drive.
And she decides that, okay, we have to have like an actual talk about this. And so she confronts him, is like, sorry, I was so blunt with you when I told you that I've fucked. And she's like, well, why are you still a virgin? The explanation that Ben gives for why hasn't done the deed is when I was your age, people didn't do that until they were wed. and he was a hard worker, and so he was basically just married to his job. So he never got the chance before he turned. And then he goes on to say that he didn't afterwards because he used to drink from people instead of stealing blood from a blood bank. I don't know. There's no ethical way to be a vampire, so whatever. But apparently, because he was drinking blood from humans, he couldn't have sex with them. Then she offers to teach him. Apparently, that doesn't happen then. Apparently, they're like, okay, well, I'll teach you, but let's wait. And then Ben texts his friend Poe, which Finn knows Poe in this story, and Ben knows Poe in this story, but they don't know that each other knows Poe in this. And also, we don't know anything about the friendship between the two of Ben and Poe, like how they know each other. Completely confusing, completely not there whatsoever. He talks to Poe about how this girl wants to do the do with him, and he's like, give me some advice. And then he sends him articles about old people having sex. Well, articles, and it's so stupid. We end the chapter with, finally, after what feels like hours, Ray Nima comes back to the apartment and she kisses him. And then we get another diary entry where he says that he's on fire after the kiss. Which, calm down, buddy. We have diary. Ray Nima's lips on mine were a revelation. My heart almost started beating again when she slipped her sweet little tongue into my mouth. I want to shout from the rooftops how good kissing her felt. The only thing preventing me from doing exactly that right this second is the memory of what happened the last time I shouted things from the rooftop. Quite frankly, the neighbors don't deserve that again. Neither do I, for that matter. As for my performance, I hope I handled myself fairly well. No thanks to Dameron, who I am never speaking to again, and his garbage advice. When she crawled onto my lap, I pulled her as close to me as I could, letting her take the lead and show me how she likes to be kissed. I am certain I had a raging boner, as Ray Nemo would put it. The entire time I could feel her pert little bottom rubbing against it in a way that made me think all sorts of inappropriate things, but I did my best not to panic or cry or do any of the other things I might have done a week ago had I then found myself with a lap full of beautiful human girl in my arms. She is a woman. Please don't call her a girl while you are kissing her. I have a raging boner right now as well. I'm guessing this may be semi-permanent, semi-awkward state of being for me until such a time as Ray Nima determines my education is complete, and she no longer wishes to do these things with me. I hope the day she no longer wants to do these things with me never comes. I might be falling in love with her. Okay. I hope my boner, God's thumb, what a funny word that is, isn't as obvious from the outside of my trousers as it feels like it must be from the inside of them. Oh, I better go. A package has just arrived. I need to sign for it more soon. So I thought that him signing off for this package would lead to him finding out about her bad dragon purchase, but does not. He never finds out, so that was just there for no reason. This next chapter, the summary of it states, prelude to the fucking.
Let's fucking go. Let's go. I guess.
And the author notes that this is where, if you've been following the story on Twitter up until this point, the new content begins here. This is also the chapter where you figure out that his name is Benjamin Chewbacca, or actually, they might refer to it like one more time before. But this is where I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Please stop. Ray finds out that she kind of likes the fangs and that it turns her on. So big hands and fangs. He also admits to her how he's done his own research before they have this moment. And Ray's reaction is Ray can't help smiling at his shy admission. Benjamin Solo is so physically strong he could probably snap her in two with a flick of his wrist. He is literally a monster, one who could kill her in an instant if he wanted to. Apparently that's a turn on, but what the fuck ever. She kisses him, and then I think she gives him a BJ. Then there's this idea of maybe I should dirty talk to you through letters, and he's just like, oh, no, 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 I want to hear it from your mouth. Describe to me your fantasies. This is before the BJ. Right. Describe to me your fantasies, and then it turns into him describing his fantasies about how when she fell asleep in his lap, he imagined, her giving him a blowjob. The smut isn't well written. Chapter 8, Benjamin, the vampire virgin no more. This is the point where I'm just like, okay, they have this may be a joke, but I don't think so. A lot of what happens in this, it skips parts, and instead of just like starting in media res, there has to be some sort of qualifier. Typically, it's somehow this happened, which just reminds me of the meme of somehow Palpatine returned.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And maybe that's what they're going for, but I don't think it is. Yeah, they're having sex and it's somehow Ray's t-shirt and her bra came off. Come off, not came off. So weird use of verbiage there. Somehow Benjamin doesn't know exactly how they make it from the living room to the bedroom. I'm guessing you fucking walked, that's how. But whatever. She reaches her climax through just penetration alone, and good for her. Like, that's not realistic, but good for her. And then the fan fiction ends, and there's an epilogue where he is replying to spam mail, which he's done in the past. They have him send money to a Nigerian prince. They have a woman solicit sex from him, and he replies like, I'm not interested. So it's an ongoing thing. I guess it's cute, but it just didn't contribute much to the story. And then we have the author's note, where she does admit that this is a silly little story, which is fine, that she had the best time writing it. So much so, in fact, that right now I am thinking pretty seriously of converting it into an original manuscript for possible publication. Eventually, winky face. If slash when I eventually take down this or any of my other fics from AO3 for original fic publishing purposes, I will post about it on my original fiction Twitter. And get your bag, girl. But I don't know, there's something just so icky to me about writing fan fiction for the purpose of future publication if you have the chance. It's just always been about sharing your love for the source material and just giving that to the community with no strings attached, and it has become this thing where it's an opportunity for publication, which is weird to me. Also, with this, I feel as though the characters themselves, besides sharing names with characters in the movies, are not the characters from the movies. Their personalities are entirely different. So there is that. But also using this as like the starting point of a manuscript, this is not well written. So I don't know if they used the multimedia in their manuscript. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I can't imagine an agent looking at this and being like, this has potential. I don't mean to be rude. That is just my thoughts. The grammar is bad, character development is bad, and I get it's a silly little fiction, silly little fan fiction, but when I read that, I was just like, I don't like it. Hi, Ursa. Can you move, please? Let's get into the published novel. My roommate is a vampire. I don't think I have mentioned this, but the author of these two works is Jen Levine. So I was actually really interested in the premise of My Roommate is a Vampire. I like vampires. When it comes to romance reads, I am typically a lot more lenient in rating them. It's kind of like my time to mindlessly read, and I am trying to get better about that. I like consuming media critically, and so I do want to consume romance critically as well. And yeah, so typically I rate romances pretty high, and it had a vampire in it. I like the idea of a vampire who was trying to, in this book, let me back up. Let me just lay it out for you. In the book, Ray is turned into Cassie, who is an artist who focuses on modern art. She is looking for a new place to live because she recently has gotten evicted and her job as an artist does not pay her well. I think there's also some stress with her family, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Meanwhile, Benjamin is now Frederick. Frederick is a vampire who has recently awoken from some sort of coma he's been in for the past few centuries. Can't remember why. And he is looking for a roommate not just for companionship, but also a human who can teach him the modern ways because he is not up to date at all on any of that. From the fan fiction to the book, the characters are given an extra sort of dimension. It's not relying on you to have previous knowledge of another media source to kind of build these characters up in your head. So with Cassie, her big thing is she incorporates garbage into her art, and not a lot of people understand her or her art. Frederick, his little quirk is, besides, being out of date, is vampires have magical powers, and his magical power is he produces fruit. And like I said, I am very lenient on romances. So it doesn't take much for me to buy into things in romances. So they're like, this vampires have special powers, he produces fruit. I'm just like, okay, that's just what he does. Whatever. Unlike the fan fiction, the reveal that he is a vampire happens on page. So good on that. And it happens much later than literally her going in to see the apartment. She opens up the fridge and she sees all the blood while he is not there. And that is how she finds out, and she has a more appropriate reaction to that. I found his motivation for wanting a roommate to be more palpable with the he's been unconscious for so many years, and I found her seeking out and accepting the situation of living with a weirdo from a Craigslist ad more believable, with her need to find a quick fix as she has been evicted and such. So I thought that was pretty well done. He is still stealing from blood banks in this. They kind of make it a subplot. Instead of, there's not as much as the multimedia aspect in the book, there is still some there. And in this one, we have news clippings that report this series of blood bank break ins. And in the fan fiction, they do briefly mention that he donates a bunch of money to charities, but I'm pretty sure they're just random charities in the fan fiction. In this, he is donating to the blood banks that he has stolen from. So he's kind of mitigating damage done, which I kind of appreciate. We are introduced in this book to a wider range of vampires. His friend, who was Poe Dameron in the fan fiction, is just an annoying person in this, but he is a vampire. He has his mother, who I was not sure throughout the whole thing whether it was his actual mother or if it was just the vampire who sired him. So there's that. And then there's another whole family. So he has his family, And then there's another family, and his mother has arranged a marriage between him and the daughter from the other family, who I think is an Instagram model. I don't know. I found the relationship was built more slowly. It was an insta love, and they expand on the watching TV. He doesn't just get a boner while she's laying in his lap asleep. They watch, I believe, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and they use this TV watching as a way of bonding, and I actually thought it was very cute. Smut was a pretty big appeal, it seemed, to the readers of the fan fiction, and I didn't like the smut in the fan fiction, but I do not remember if there is smut in the book. And if there is, that says a lot about the smut in the book. So it gets really sloppy near the end of the book. The other family kidnaps Frederick when he tries to break off the engagement to the daughter. And then Frederick's friend flies, like vampires fly, flies Cassie to retrieve him. And if I remember correctly, they just let him go. And then I don't actually remember like the very, very end, but not much happens after that. So, having read this book, and again, this was before I realized it was a Reylo book, I rated it 2 stars. And according to my rating scale, how I rate things, a 2 star is wasted potential. I do think that if this went through another round of developmental edits, then they would have been able to fix up the very, very sloppy ending and have made it something that was really cute, and I really, really would have enjoyed it, to be quite honest. And I will say that based on this, it does seem that the fan fiction served as an outline for this, a very, very rough draft for this story. And with that, with going through edits from the author, developmental edits, and all that, it really improved upon the fan fiction, but the parts that were added to the story were rough. Fan fiction was a good starting point, but it shouldn't be your only starting point, especially for all of your work going forward. I don't know if I will read another book from this author. Again, I don't like the idea of going into writing fan fiction with the intention to then just take that fan fiction, change the names, and get it published. For this, I will say that in the original fan fiction, they did not really reflect the characters from Star Wars to me. They also expanded upon vampire lore in the book a little bit more, so if I had to reread one of these again, it would definitely be the published work, but the fan fiction it was based on was not good. Thank you for watching. Next up is going to be the Hurricane Wars and the fan fiction it was based off of, that whose title is from a T.S. Eliot poem. Yeah, bye.